Hi, I'm Eddie Obeng, and this is How. Daily, I bring you a different way of doing something a bit better than you used to, make you more effective. Today, I want to try and help you get into people's minds so that you can provide better information, persuade them more easily, and influence them so that they can actually work together as a group on a specific vision, all with the same commitment. It's called MrMindset. It's about redoing the way in which people think. Let's jump on to Cube and let's have a look and see what we can find. So welcome to Cube, where, as you know, the sun is always shining. This is the workshop generator cubicle. When people want to transform what they do face to face to make it work on Cube, we send them here. And this is a course designer. So it basically starts telling you what you need to do. And this is a typical course designer. You highlight what you're going to do, how you're going to do, who's going to do it, where they're going to do it. And at the end here, there's something called a moodogram. There's a pet for moodogram. You can go and look that up. But you can design a session quite quickly, collaboratively, and be able to put it into practice. Anyway, we came here for MrMindset, so let's have a look. So this story starts with a session I did for very, very top scientists across Europe. And I had to persuade them of change. But the problem is these were all top scientists. And one of the headaches which you face when you have people who are very eminent is they want to know your sources. They want to know who you are. They want to know whether they should listen to you. And one of the challenges we had early in the session was it's quite obvious that they were only going to listen to people they thought were top-notch. And obviously, I'm not one of them. So I had to figure out how I managed to persuade them from their point of view. If you've read the book, The Complete Leader, you'd have started to understand MrMindset. So the idea developed from some work from Klaus Janssen in 75, when I was at Ashridge. Klaus Janssen wrote a book based on the four-room house, which was his PhD thesis. And together with Jim Durkin and Paul Kirkbride, we produced some more research and built on it. So we ended up with what we call MrMindset. The best way to think about MrMindset is, if you remember when you were a kid, there was a book, cartoon called The Numbskulls. And there were these people who lived in somebody's house, but they were in his head. And if they left the tap on, then his nose would drip. If they were hammering a wall in, he'd have a headache, and so on. So think about these people living in your house in your head, a house in your head. Okay. So what we really described was 4 different areas, which is the Janssen ones. Janssen talked about, people are quite happy and content before they start to change anything. If you suggest something to them, they go into what they call the denial room. If they have to change, they go into the chaos and confusion room. And if you're lucky, you get them back into renewal. And so we expanded that to say it wasn't just contentment, it was contentment and complacency. And it wasn't just denial, but they'd actually denigrate anything new and say how bad it was. It wasn't just confusion, it was chaos, because they really didn't know what they were going to do. And then revitalization. When we started looking at it, what we realized was that, for example, instead of people going from chaos to being able to renew, most people would then do things like they go out through the wrong door. They'd hire the wrong consultants who give them the wrong advice. So we've got a wrong direction door, which you can go into. Sometimes they just give up. We call that the dungeon of despair, where basically the whole organization just didn't know what to do. There's also, in terms of the denial, they would get data. We need better data for better decisions. They go into what we call the paralysis-of-analysis pit, where the organization could spend a whole year just going around in circles. And this is what I was talking about, which is the 5th room, which wasn't on Klaus Jansen's, but the scientists taught me this, which I call the attic of arrogance, where, how dare you even mention to me I might need to think about changing. But the one which was fascinating was successful businesses found it really hard to change. Often they'd stay doing the successful thing long after it was due to stop and change, and then they would fail catastrophically. At the time, we were teaching case studies like Kodak and so on. So it was quite obvious that going onto the sun deck of success, where you're just chilling and enjoying yourself, was over and above complacency, but it led to the same result of failure because you couldn't move through change. And what we realized, these mindsets made people stuck. So I started thinking about, well, what do you do with each different mindset, and how do you make them move? So what I realized was that if you want a group of people to move, you have to address all the different mindsets in the group. If they're all of the same type, great. So almost all my scientists were in this attic of arrogance. So what I actually did was I found quotes from some of the top scientists in the area who weren't on the workshop. I find quotes from previous scientists who were eminent, and I just basically use those quotes to say, if only we'd realized that plasma analysis could have made our work faster, we could have moved. I didn't use quotes from me. I didn't use quotes from people they didn't know. I basically gave them bad news from someone they respected. So that's a good way to start your conversation with people. You go, well, so-and-so is thinking this. And by providing the bad news from people they respect, you've dealt with the people whose mindset is in the attic of arrogance. Then you want to move into contentment and complacency. This is very much explaining why there must change. Often in my world, I'll explain about the old world and the new world, the pace of change overtaking the pace of learning. And then once they've understood that, you focus on the future. Well, what's going to happen to you next? So we start looking about, well, if you keep doing, and this one I remember in particular, when I was working with Sony, this worked brilliantly because I had a group of them. And I said, well, you guys make a lot of money in Sony. Yes. You make money from selling big cameras. Yes. Each one's a couple of million. Yes. These new little cameras are coming, which are digital. Yes. What's going to happen to you in the future? How many people do you think you're going to have reporting to you? How big do you think your markets are going to be? And I just gave them an exercise to focus on the future. So that shifted their mindset from, hey, we're the coolest, to, oh my goodness, the future doesn't look as good. I got them off the sun deck. So now we can start understanding why we must change. And then having got them moving, I started to get them through this denial and denigration by being very clear on what has to change. Because people panic and think that everything has to alter. I go, no, 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 no. It's just you're not present in the small camera area. So you have to move into that. So you have to change everything altogether. So that makes them much happier to move. And if they start saying, but we don't know how big the market is going to be, you go, well, okay, why don't you run some tests? You get them to learn from action, and you get them to talk about what actions they could take to learn to stop them going to the paralysis pit. And then you start describing what the future looks like. Help them to understand what they need to change to. This is what your outcome is going to be. And if they're feeling a bit demotivated, then you've put in some motivational counseling, but the motivation is really a sort of more inspiring, telling them how they could do it, remind them of what they've done in the past, which worked. If they've got consultants, it's persuade them to sack them and to actually do the work themselves, learn in their own heads instead of taking somebody else's thing. Because guess what? If it's innovation, no one's going to come from the outside and show you how it's done. Because guess what? They haven't invented it yet. And that allowed them to go into how they're going to make the change and sustain it. So that's MrMindset. When you're preparing a presentation, think about your audience. Make sure that you've got the ability to go through your presentation and tick off every single one of these boxes by thinking about who the message is for and then adding in the right message. So if you do that, you'll find that even in an audience with people with different mindsets, you won't have to have, there's a phrase which says it's nice to spend time with people with the same mind or mindset. There's some strange phrase people use. No, it's not really. You just want to spend time with people. And if they've got different mindsets, it's your role to change them all. I've been Eddie Obeng. Subscribe or read the newsletter or go and do it today. Use the quick guide.